Recently, a reasonable bipartisan measure in the U.S. Senate to expand background checks was derailed by 46 senators out of 100 in a vocal minority of money. It will be bad. Meanwhile, Governor Shumlin says we need a 50-state solution to cure America's horrific, that's his word, horrific gun violence problem, adding that, quote, no state is an island, close quote. Actually, Vermont is an island. Ours is the only state lacking a law prohibiting felons from having firearms. Unlike police in every other state, our law enforcement officers cannot charge armed drug runners with a weapons violation. And that uptick in drug trafficking within our borders is no surprise. Surely when the governor says that the nation should be more like Vermont with guns, it cannot mean giving these bad apples a free pass. If Governor Shumlin really believes in a 50-state solution, he should champion a measure to fix this, crack down on gun criminals, and join the rest of the nation. Otherwise, we will continue to draw felons here like mosquitoes to a swamp. And if any of you are wondering, I actually have a spare t-shirt for the governor should you like to join us on the steps for a group picture later today. Governor Shumlin also says, quote, Vermonters don't buy guns here to maim and kill people. They have them to manage our natural resources and keep our hunting tradition alive. The governor is partly right. However, good intentions by themselves are inadequate to shield us from tragedies. People don't buy cars to have accidents, so we have legal standards for using public highways. Likewise, well-intentioned gun owners alone don't stop Vermont children from killing themselves with unsecured guns in the home. Sadly, we lead the Northeast in youth firearm suicide death. Nor do those good intentions stop armed drug runners from coming here, nor do they prevent Vermont guns from migrating to nearby states to fuel crime. We can and should do more that makes sense and be part of a real 50-state solution. Our families and communities are at stake. And now I want to introduce Dina Janis, who's going to talk a little bit about gun trafficking. Dina is professor of theater at Bennington College and a committed member of Gun Sense Vermont. Thank you, Dina.
I don't really have much to say. I was charged with researching the gun trafficking problems that happen in Vermont. And I thought that was going to be a very simple, somewhat short research project. And I have to say, and I'm here to say that I'm committed to trying to get this information out there, it is absolutely amazing how much a guns for drugs problem we have in this state. In the past couple of years, many of you may remember some of the huge busts that have occurred in Bennington and Rutland and those areas. And the problem is that because of our lax gun laws here, it's very cheap to buy a gun illegally. It's very easy. There's no penalty for doing so. You can buy a gun legally here if you're a felon and not worry about prosecution. And as a result of that, the guns and drug trafficking problem is so interconnected. And it is something that is really a scourge in even little towns like Chester, Vermont. You know, we think of Vermont as this amazingly bucolic, Green Mountain, friendly farmers, cows, cheese. And what has begun to happen here is that we have begun to get a reputation as the most gang-friendly state in New England. And that is not a joke. That is actually real. You have people heading here by car and megabus in order to traffic their drugs in exchange for the guns that we so easily and readily provide them without any concern about prosecution. So this is a huge problem that I have to say, I feel all of us who care about our hardworking law enforcement, the mayors and leaders of our towns need to really look at this problem and realize that we really need to address the straw purchases problem here. We need to address the no background checks. We need to put into place very simple, basic, common sense regulation that is designed to protect our families, numbers in our towns, because this problem isn't going away, it's not going to get smaller, it's just going to get bigger. And the other issue, which is really frightening and important, is that though we, as the governor keeps saying, do not have a problem, a gun problem in Vermont, I don't agree with that, but even if I did agree with it, for the sake of argument, I would have to also bring up the point that 16% of the guns that are found in the neighboring states through different confiscation from drugs and crime are coming from our state. So I have to say, since when was Vermont a state that did not care about what impact we are having on our fellow countrymen? Since when was an issue that was important, and I will cite civil unions as a perfect example. We took leadership on that issue. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of time and a lot of hard thought and a lot of debate with all sorts of people in Vermont, but we didn't shy away from it. We took leadership on that issue, not because there wasn't, the governors then, the people of Vermont did not wait for a 50-state solution to civil unions. And as a result, we took leadership and we were a catalyst for change. This state stood up and said, we need to be a catalyst for change. And that's exactly what we're calling on the governor to do now. It is simply not acceptable for him to sit back and listen to the voices that are highly organized and have been for years, meaning the pro-gun lobby and the NRA, and assume that we don't have something that needs to be discussed here. He needs to listen to all of the constituents, not just the people he chooses to. And that's why we're here. We're here and we're not going away. The other thing I would just say is that personally, you know, I always come back to the issue of, or the moment of Sandy Hook. I can't forget Sandy Hook. And again, I would say to Vermont, are we a state that can be a neighbor of a state where something like that happened to that many children simply going to school in kindergarten and first grade and not respond? You know, this idea that we don't need to address this problem because we don't have this problem seems to me the most unethical and un-American response for a tragedy of that magnitude. And there isn't a day that I go through without remembering that tragedy and others and really making a commitment to honoring those families, those parents, especially heading into Mother's Day this weekend. And I just want to say that my heart breaks every day when I think of those parents and when I think of the fact that when they know that in our own government, in the Senate, this recent thing in the Senate and in Vermont, people step back casually and say, we don't want to take on this issue. This issue is not important. That to me is the most mind-boggling response. So I'm very proud to be a part of this particular group. We really want to try to encourage a conversation. It's not about what the solution is. We have ideas, other people have ideas. But I feel in Vermont, you have the opportunity for gun owners, for people who are in sport and gun, law enforcement, teachers, educators, parents, all sorts of people with various opinions can come together and find solutions that will keep our children safer. And that's why we're here. We want the conversation. It's not okay with us that there's no conversation and that the governor has just decided to shut this down because he has a personal opinion that there's no gun problem in Vermont. We need to have that conversation. We need people's voices to be heard. And then we can decide, is there or isn't there a gun problem in Vermont? Okay, so that's basically all I'm saying.
Hi, my name is Danielle Brooks, and I'm also here as part of this group. I have 2 young children, and Sandy Hook had a huge impact on me. But I'm here today to read a statement from Montpelier Mayor John Holler, who could not be with us today, but he sent along his words, and these are his words now. Thank you for gathering today to bring attention to the need for common sense limits on the purchase and ownership of guns in Vermont. I am pleased to be a member of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a coalition of more than 850 mayors that was formed by New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Mayors Against Illegal Guns is dedicated to making America's cities safer by cracking down on illegal guns. 30,000 Americans are killed every year as a result of gun violence, destroying families and harming communities. Mayors have a responsibility to protect their communities by holding gun offenders and irresponsible gun dealers accountable, demanding access to data that is critical to law enforcement efforts to combat illegal gun trafficking and promote changes in our laws that make it too easy for criminals and other prohibited purchasers of guns. I believe our legislators share those responsibilities. Vermont is an exceptional place in many ways, but we are not immune to the gun violence that has taken such a heavy toll in communities around the country. There are communities not unlike Montpelier or Brattleboro or St. Johnsbury or Newport. There are individuals in our communities who should not own firearms, yet we make it easy for them to buy them. And the guns these unstable individuals can purchase are not merely firearms, but combat weapons originally designed to kill large numbers of people in a short period of time. Law enforcement officials tell us that easy access to guns in Vermont makes our state an attractive place for gun traffickers in the Northeast. They travel to our communities to trade drugs for guns, endangering our communities, and most importantly, our children. I wholly support the efforts of Gun Sense Vermont to promote common sense solutions such as universal background checks, a ban on high-capacity magazine clips, and a limit on new sales of assault weapons. Thank you all for your efforts on behalf of our communities. Again, that's from Montpelier Mayor John Pollard. I have Richard Chaplinsky, who is a hunter and a veteran.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am a hunter since I was 5 years old or so. I should have had a gun in my hands at that time, but I did. I'm also a veteran from 64 to 69 in the U.S. Navy. This is not about taking away guns like the NRA says. It's about gun safety and keeping guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them, that can cause accidents or damage or tragedies. And the one thing I want to say comes out of the word complicity. If we don't take action to keep guns out of the wrong hands, we are complicit in the guns, in the tragedies that occur, the accidents that occur elsewhere. We don't take action here. We have a responsibility to do that. And I'd like to remind the governor and the representatives and senators that we do need to take action. They do need to have courage to do this. We are complicit in those tragedies and accidents if we do not take action. That's my message. Let us not be complicit. Let's take action and have our consciences free from that kind of thing. We need to take action to keep safety and tragedies keep them out, keep them from happening. Thank you.
We've heard about gun trafficking as a problem. We've heard about suicide rate. In 2009, it was the 16th highest in the nation. And since then, it has risen by 15%. Meanwhile, states that require gun owners to store their guns so that children and teens cannot access them have reduced suicides of adolescents by 8% and accidental shootings by as much as 23%. I was talking yesterday to Louis DeNicola, who's the president of the Vermont chapter of the Academy of Pediatricians. And in discussing the gun issue, he said, this country and this state are looking at this issue with a blind eye to how really bad it is. Yesterday, he and Elliot Nelson sent a letter urging this legislative body to take steps to reduce gun violence. The letter was signed by most of the practicing pediatricians in the state. We cannot afford to turn a blind eye. The governor likes to say that if everyone treated guns the way we do in Vermont, there wouldn't be a problem. Yes, we have lots of responsible gun owners in Vermont, but there are also lots of responsible gun owners in Connecticut and in Colorado. The thing about guns is it it just takes one irresponsible person and one split second to pull the trigger. We can't afford to wait till we have our own mass tragedy. Last week, the governor was asked about the possibility of such a thing, a mass tragedy in Vermont, and he said, I am not going to, sorry, this is the quote, I'm not going to speculate or get into a discussion of something horrific happening in Vermont. I think that only leads to escalating the environment that we live in as a nation. And while I understand that we don't want to escalate this environment, he might not want to think about it, but not everyone has that luxury. The children who are scared to go to the bathroom at school because they've learned from lockdown drills that if something happens and you're in there, you're on your own, they are thinking about this. The children who were on the school bus in Barnet a couple weeks ago when a 13-year-old pointed a gun at that bus, they are thinking about it. These children deserve a governor that is thinking about it too. Action needs to be taken next session. Public opinion is for this, and there is no excuse to wait. Fix these problems for Vermont. Join with neighboring states and come up with a solution for the region. The governor can be a leader on this issue. He can be a pro-gun, pro-responsibility leader, and he needs to be. Because this issue isn't going away. And we are not going away. We are just getting started. This organization was formed less than 2 months ago, and already we have members in over 100 Vermont towns. We will be here next session, and we will be even bigger. Because when the facts are on your side, and public opinion is on your side, and the safety of your family and neighbors is at stake, reverting back to silence is no longer an option. Thank you.